Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 95 of the Sophie Art podcast, which is a little podcast that I do about the art and tings. And this one will be a little one because I'm not feeling very well, so I'm eating some honey and lemon lockets. If you hear them on the audio or something. And little Dennis is looking after. Just dropped some toilet roll. But Dennis is looking after the toilet roll, so if I have to blow my nose or something. But I'm still doing a little podcast. But this one will be a bit. I'm going to go back in time for this one. So this one is a mystery topic. What I'm going to do, around episode 50 or something, I did about 10 episodes where I randomly pulled a topic out of my little handbag and talked about it for 15 minutes. So that's what this week's podcast is going to be. I'm quite excited for this one because I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. So little Dennis is with us, little co-host, and he'll be pulling out the random topic in a minute. And what else have we got? This week's inspirational quote will be coming from a book called Journey to Ixtlan, The Lessons of Don Juan, and it's by Carlos Castaneda. This book, I heard about it probably about a year and a half ago. Robert Wagner, the lucid dreaming expert, he mentioned this book because it was this book that gave him the technique to look at his hands to become lucid. So there's a really cool little quote in there. I've only just started reading it. There's a cool quote right at the start. So that's this week's inspirational quote. And also I did a little video which you can find at youtube.com/Sophie Lawson. I did it yesterday of fantasy tattoo art, artistic illustrations by Zayabe. This book is so beautiful. Every single page is beautiful. And I feel like this is actually going to be my favourite art book of all time. It really does feel like that. So you'll be able to find that on YouTube and stuff. And I am still doing my studying. It's quite funny because at the moment I'm doing little drawings of fabric for this course. But because I've got such a runny nose, there's actually little little bogey things on it. It's disgusting, but it's there. You can't. That's something I've noticed. Once you get a bit of liquid on pencil drawing, you can never get rid of it. It's quite annoying, that. So that's just that, really. I think we should get into it. So, little Dennis, are you ready for this one? Da-da-da. So the rules are, you've got 15 minutes to talk about a random topic. I'll start the little timer there, and whatever you pull out, you've got to talk about it. I'm going to change the rules a bit because the website at sophielawson.com is broken at the minute. If I pull out a topic and it says read a blog post or a diary entry or something, if it's anything to do with reading something on the website, I'm going to skip it. So that's the only rules. And so let's get into this one. Quite exciting. Little Dennis is going through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the podcast a secret as well. So we're both going to find out at the same time what this week's topic is. So little Dennis has pulled out of the bag. And the topic is... Ooh, that's an interesting one. Talk about mistakes. So we start the timer. 15 minutes to talk about mistakes. Blimey. So I forgot what it was like to do these because you don't know anything what you're going to talk about. It's a little bit strange. I suppose I could jump straight into this and say some mistakes you can't fix. So you have to adapt. So on this drawing, because on this course what I'm doing is she's got me drawing little pieces of fabric. So I've drawn a pair of jeans. I've drawn two little things. What the course is all about fabric and looking at and drawing fabric folds and wrinkles. but I've got a really runny nose at the minute and a sore throat. And what I was doing was, yesterday I was drawing it's a little satin dress. I sat in my dress drawing it, and I didn't realise, but it was dripping. It's disgusting, really. And then once that got on there, you can't change it. So I guess where I'm going to go with this topic, I would say some mistakes you can't change, but some mistakes are quite beautiful. Have I got any examples of mistakes that I've made? Have I got any examples of mistakes? Well, I know when I'm doing my study notes, what I do is I write my study notes out rough, and then I rewrite them nice and tidy. And what I've noticed is, it doesn't happen very often, but if I make a mistake when I'm rewriting the notes, I'll end up rewriting the whole notes. That's probably like OCD, really. Yeah, perfectionism. So I think the thing with mistakes is, well, I like mistakes because they sort of guide you in a strange way. Sometimes mistakes guide you. Yeah. It's almost like some mistakes they end up not being mistakes in the end. I'm trying to think of some examples. Yeah, I can't really think of any examples off the top of my head. Mistakes that I've made. What mistakes have I made? See, the one that springs to mind is I moved in with my mum about, what was it? 2016, I think. Moved in with my mum and lived with her because I thought we would help each other, and it ended up sort of being a mistake, really. And at the time it seemed like a big mistake. I look back now and I think it's the best thing that ever happened, because what ended up happening was I ended up basically moving out, and I ended up where I'm living now, and I separated from my mum for about a few years. But what's happened now is me and my mum have got back together. We started talking again, and I feel like our relationship is the best it's ever been. So it's almost like, in a weird way, that what seemed like a massive mistake at the time, it's ended up being the best thing ever, because it's actually brought us closer together. So I almost feel like, and you could even say, like, this thing here, with this drawing I've done where I've accidentally dribbled on the thing, it's a mistake, but it's also not, because next time, this is the thing, you've got to learn from your mistakes, really. I think there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, as long as you're not making the same mistakes over and over. So, like, next time I do a drawing, if I'm sitting down and I've got a super runny nose, what I'll probably do is I'll probably stick some toilet paper up my nose like this, and then if I'm drawing and I've got this toilet paper up my nose, it's not going to dribble. So that's the thing. What mistakes do is you learn from your mistakes and you sort of adapt. And that's also given me something to talk about on this podcast. So if I hadn't have done that yesterday, I wouldn't have had nothing to talk about. So sometimes mistakes, I would almost say, yeah, I feel like life is just one big mistake. It is. If you look at your life, you could look at it and it looks like it's just a series of mistakes, but it's not really mistakes. It's again, you're making decisions. Every second you're making decisions, and some of those decisions are going to end up not being quite right, because you can't predict. Like, you might do something which in that moment feels like the absolute perfect thing to do. Again, what's an example? Say you might quit your job or something. So you might quit your job and it's the perfect thing to do in that moment. Or actually, yeah, I don't know, you might get the sack, or you might do something wrong, get the sack, and it ends up that you end up in like a different job, which ends up being a lot better. So that little mistake was actually a good thing, but it can go the other way where you think you're doing something right. Yeah, sometimes you think so much about something, you think you're doing the right thing, but it's that right thing ends up being a mistake. So really, mistakes are decisions linked to the future. So yeah, and you can't really tell that. But even if it ends up being a mistake, I would almost argue it is not in the end going to be a mistake, because as long as you're learning from what you're doing, there's never going to be a mistake, because you're always going to be able to make another decision. Which, if you just keep making decisions which you feel are the best thing, it doesn't matter whether it ends up with a string of mistakes. Because I feel like in the end you would end up in the right place. It's almost like the intention. If you're making a decision and your intention is pure, even if it ends up mistakes, I feel like in the end you would end up in the right place. That's what I think. What have I got? We've got 8 minutes. I'm trying to talk and think at the same time of some of my mistakes. What's some of my mistakes? The one with my mum springs to mind. Have I done any mistakes with my art? I've done lots of mistakes. That was actually quite good. I got these little paintings. I did a painting challenge last year. Was it last year? I think it was the year before. 30 days of painting every day. And what I noticed in that was, I've said about this before, when you're doing a painting, especially like an abstract painting, but when you're doing a painting, it's just a series of mistakes, because I've said, like, when you're painting, it's almost like the paint is painting with you. So you'll put something down, and you think, that's, like, the paint will dribble, and you think, I've done that wrong. But the paint, it's like what I said before, mistakes will always end up being the right thing as long as you're learning. It's almost like the paint isn't making a mistake. The paint knows what it's doing. So the paint dribbles down here. You think it's a mistake, but then when the painting's finished, you look back, and that little dribble, it's actually really good, because what's happened is that dribble has sort of taken you off in a different direction. So like what I said before, it's like the painting. It's like the paint is painting with you. I love that. And so I would say painting is the best example of it's just a series of mistakes again. With drawing, I feel like it's too easy to erase your mistakes, so you never really get to see where that mistake might take you. So there is something to be said, I think, with maybe not using erasers so much. Maybe do a drawing where you say to yourself, no matter what happens, I'm not going to use any erasers. And at that point, it's almost like you and the drawing, you and the pencil would be working together. So I'd love to do that, actually. A realistic pencil drawing. Imagine doing a realistic pencil drawing where you never use an eraser. That'd be amazing. I don't know whether you could do that, though. That'd be quite interesting. I've just thought of another mistake as well. So, when was this? I think this was 2018 as well. I started running, and I fell in love with it. And I was running about. I started out. What I did was, I've got this little tree friend at Saltram. So what I did was, I ran to my tree friend. I sat there for about 20 minutes, and then I'd run home. So it ended up being 2 lots of 2 miles. So it was like a 4-mile run. And I was doing that, and then what happened was, the mistake was, I started pushing myself too much. And I started running. Well, in the end, I did a half marathon, which was about 13 miles, I think. And the thing was, as I was running it was easy. It wasn't easy. I love running because it's like a mental thing. When you're running, especially right at the very start, the first mile of running, I feel like is the hardest bit, because your mind is trying to make you stop. But yeah, for me, running is a mental thing. It's you stay focused on what I do is, as I'm running along. If there's loads of lampposts, I'll say all I've got to do is run to that lamppost. So I'm not thinking about running like 5 miles. I'm just thinking about running, I don't know, like a couple metres to the lamppost. You get to that lamppost, and then you focus on the next lamppost, and then before you know it, you're at the last lamppost. So you sort of break it down. But what happens is, I've noticed the mind is saying stuff like, "Oh, just stop. It's not worth it," and it's trying so hard to make you stop running. So I pushed through that. That's probably. But what I ended up doing was I pushed too much, and so my mistake was I pushed too hard too soon, and I did this half marathon. I was so proud of myself. I think I ran it was under 8 minutes a mile, which was apparently some sort of it's some sort of gold. It's a sub 8 minute mile or something, because I knew a runner, a professional runner, and when I said to her I'd run it in like 8 minutes a mile, it was 7 minutes 50 something. She said, "Oh, that's really good, because it's one of the goals is to aim for under 8 minute a mile." But so what happened was, at the time it was like, "Oh, this is amazing," and then the next day after that my ankle swelled up, and I couldn't do any running. I could hardly walk for probably about 3 weeks maybe. So the running got stopped, and then it took me months before my ankle was proper. And then the problem with that is I actually stopped running. So I stopped running for probably about 1.5 years. I started running again just before Christmas. I did 3 weeks of running, and yeah, the last couple of weeks I haven't been out running, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm going to get it back. So I've definitely learnt from my mistake, because now I've only been running 3 miles, and what I've said to myself is I'm only running 3 miles for a few months until I know that that's really quite easy, and then all I'm going to do is add a mile, but keep adding a mile every sort of 3 months. So because what I did was I went 3 miles or 4 miles. I started out at 2 miles because I ran to my tree and then I walked home. So I did 2 miles, then I did 4 miles, and then before I knew it I was doing like 8 miles. And I went from 10 miles to 13 miles. And the thing is, I finished at 13 miles, and I really felt like I could have kept going. I felt like I could have done a marathon. But it's so weird. It's almost like you don't realise. Yeah, sometimes you don't realise the damage you're doing until after. It's quite weird, that. But I've definitely learnt from it. So, again, is it a mistake? Is it a mistake? Not really. You lost out on a lot of running, but who knows? Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be running every day for like 3 miles. Whereas if I hadn't done that mistake, if I hadn't done that mistake, maybe I would have. Don't know. I don't see mistakes as mistakes. I guess that's what I'm getting at. We've got 40 seconds, little Dennis. 40 seconds. I kind of enjoyed that. Talking about mistakes. I think the moral of the story is, I would say, just don't worry about mistakes. Just let the mistakes be, because half the time the mistake is thinking that the mistake is a mistake. Little Dennis. I like that. Well, we got 9, 8, 7. I think I'll end with a slap. Hot chocolate slap. Dun dun dun, dun dun dun. Mistakes. I hope you liked that, Dennis. I think he did. And that's basically this week's little podcast. So I hope you enjoyed that. And you can find show notes and everything at sophielawson.com. And you can find videos at youtube.com/sophielawson. All that's left is this week's little inspirational quote. And it goes to Carlos Castaneda. Is it Carlos Castaneda that said it? Oh, got the wrong page. Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda is a quote by Carlos Castaneda, but I think he is quoting Don Juan. But this quote is from the book Journey to Excellence. And this quote is... Here we go. Right, he says... Yeah, I'll read the first bit. It's a little paragraph, really. He said, for the sake of validating this premise. So Don Juan is talking about how you have to stop, what is it called? Stop the world, I think he calls it. Yeah, you have to stop the world, which I think really is just all about, being present and emptying your mind of beliefs and stuff. So he says, for the purpose of presenting my argument, no he doesn't, he says, for the sake of validating this premise, Don Juan concentrated the best of his efforts into leading me to a genuine conviction. So this is the quote. He says, what I held in my mind as the world at hand was merely a description of the world, a description that had been pounded into me from the moment I was born. I love it. So, and then he talks here about how when you're growing up, your parents are basically your teachers for the first few years. You've got no control over that. And then the rest of your life, if you're not focusing on your awareness and stuff, the rest of your life is going to be filled with beliefs which are based on these beliefs that your parents had. So in other words, the world isn't really what you think it is. It's only what you think it is because that's what you've been told it is. So if you start looking and thinking, hang on, is the world really the way that I've always thought it is? You'll see it's not. And then once you realise it's not, which for me, that's really what happened with these lucid dreams. The minute you realise the world isn't what you think it is, or it's not what you've always thought it was, you start thinking, well, what is it then? And then all of a sudden, possibilities. Because you start to realise the world is whatever you think it is. So if you change what you think, you are changing the world. It kind of goes into my little theory from last week. The reason that we are all in our own universe is because then we change our beliefs, we change our universe, but other people will have different beliefs, so they're going to have a different universe. So we're all together, but we're all separate in a strange way. It's cool. So this week's little inspirational quote is, what I held in my mind as the world at hand was merely a description of the world. A description that had been pounded. I love that word. Pounded. It's aggressive. It had been pounded into me from the moment I was born. Carlos Castaneda. Da 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 da. Boogies.